Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of 10,000 Roads to Financial Independence. Today, I have Brian Hemedinger. Brian begins with his professional career as an actor for 10 years in New York City, pursuing his childhood dream. In 2005, he was 95K in debt as a poor actor, recently married and earning less than 35K per year. He decided to pivot. Brian began a long and successful career with an upscale fitness brand, starting as a salesperson and eventually overseeing sales for over 30 multi-million-dollar locations. He discovered a talent and passion for coaching, which leads him to become a certified professional coach, IPEC, in 2017. As Brian focused on his financial education, he learned about multifamily real estate, and in 2020 launched Maebar Capital, a real estate investing company helping working professionals passively invest in cash flow multifamily real estate. Welcome to our show today, Brian.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. I've listened to some of your show and you ask excellent questions, so I'm really excited to be here.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. And so, Brian, we always start our question, so looking back into your childhood, who are the people, or is there an instance you can share with us that shaped entrepreneur who you are today?
Yeah, well, I think when I look back, I understand that I grew up in a household where my father worked for the power company for 38 years. Mm-hmm. His father also worked for that power company for his entire career. And his brother worked for that power company for his entire career. Yeah. And my mother worked too. So that was a big part of what shaped not my entrepreneurial mindset, but my employee mindset. Mm-hmm. Having said that, my parents did invest in an 8-unit apartment building when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. I was not paying much attention to it, but I'm sure that it got in the back of my mind. Mm-hmm. And there was, when I think about it now, there was exposure to people that owned their own businesses. There was exposure to people that were investing in real estate. Mm-hmm. But to be honest, I wasn't really paying attention to it. I wasn't what I was thinking about it. It's only when I look back now that I realized, hey, there were these examples in my life. I just wasn't particularly interested in them at the time. Mm-hmm. I was a paper boy, but I was a pretty bad paper boy.
How can you be bad?
I think I actually paid to deliver papers because I was so poor about collecting.
Gotcha. So that's very interesting. And then so how did you kind of gone from people? Did you had a full-time job experience after that? So because you were influenced by employee mindset. So what did you do? How's your life kind of unfold?
Yeah, well, you read some of my bio, and what happened for me is when I was 18, I had a mentor from high school, mm-hmm. and she happened to teach at our University of Buffalo. That's where I went to school. Mm-hmm. And I was talking to her about, what do I do with my life? Because, when you're 18, you got to decide what you're going to do with the next 40, 50 years of your life. Yeah. And she said, well, what are you passionate about? And I said, well, I'm passionate about theater. I'm passionate about acting. And she said, well, that's an option. You can do that. And that's the decision I made at that time. And it's one of those things where I think about, Tony Robbins has this quote that our destiny is shaped in the moments of our decision or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I realized making that decision at that time at 18 created the trajectory really for that next 13 years. Mm-hmm. So as you read, I moved to New York and I was focused on acting. Mm-hmm. And that was my thing. That was my identity. That was my passion. So I was not thinking about business. I was not thinking about entrepreneurship. I was thinking about a craft, about just improving as an actor and ultimately succeeding as an actor. Mm-hmm. From there, when I reached that moment that you read about, when I was now 30 or 31, and I looked back and I realized, okay, I'm $95,000 in debt from student loans and from credit card. I'm now married and I'm making $35,000 a year, which was sort of what I was consistently making. Not all acting, by the way. Some of it was acting, but I was always doing other types of jobs to pay the bills too. That's where a shift happened, where I realized that even though I had committed so hard to being an actor, to that identity, that I had the option to shift.
Mhm.
Just like that moment when I was 18, when I had the choice to make a decision on what I wanted to do, I realized I still have that choice.
Right.
It doesn't have to be the thing I committed to 13 years ago.
Mhm. So is there like a single moment that where it hit you? Sometimes it's like a one instance hit you, but also sometimes it's kind of like this long prolonged realization. Like, so how did that kind of happen to you?
It was a prolonged realization
Yeah.
without question.
Every time you
It
check the
was,
credit card bill, you're like,
it was really difficult because
yeah,
when you have, and I know you could probably relate to this, and I'm sure many people can relate to this, when you have a dream and you're going after it,
yeah,
to transition where you say, I'm not going to pursue that dream anymore, that's really challenging. It's really challenging to make that decision when
hmm,
you spent so much time and energy
right,
pursuing that, and it's so much a part of your identity and who you are. So it
yeah,
was a long transition. I remember having multiple conversations with my girlfriend at the time, who then became my wife, and just talking through it, like, what else could I do? Could I do something else? Like, how do I make this work? What
mm,
other effort do I need to put in as an actor to make it work? Like all those things. So it was a long transition. And then
mm,
I'll say that when I made that transition and
mm,
I ultimately got a sales job at an upscale fitness brand where I
yeah,
still work today. And as soon as I did it and I
yeah,
got into sales and I took all that energy and all that passion and all that focus and I put it on this other role, I
hmm,
was immediately very successful
hmm,
and really happy with it,
yeah,
because to be able to then do something and see the results from that and succeed at it was so gratifying.
mm,
So
yeah,
it worked really, really well. And then through the years, through that company, just developed other passions, developed a passion for sales, developed a passion for leadership,
hmm,
developed a passion for business and understanding more about business through ultimately running fitness clubs and learning more about how business works, which is
yeah.
ultimately what led me to real estate as well.
Yeah. So that's quite a journey because it's like, doesn't that like, isn't that cliche of artists is all poor? Like, in the artist community, sometimes people would say, well, like people kind of frown upon money, right? Which I don't think it's really the right mentality. You're running a business as an actor yourself as well, or as a painter, as other artists. So kind of switching into the sales job, which is now you're all like the business side. It's a quite big shift. So, what if you're looking back your career as actor, which at the time I'm assuming you're an entrepreneur yourself or running an actor business. Now looking back to that, what would you say to yourself? Do you feel like you could have succeeded? And then what were the elements that kind of held you back?
Remember how I said you ask really good questions? That's a good
Yeah,
one.
yeah, yeah.
So when I look back, yes, I could have succeeded. I do believe I could have succeeded.
Uh-huh.
I think part of what it was for me was one of the reasons that I went to graduate school, for example, for acting. One of the
Mm-hmm.
reasons I went to graduate school was because I recognized that if I didn't succeed as an actor,
Mm-hmm.
that having the graduate school degree would give me the ability to teach
Yeah,
acting. And I
yeah.
loved teaching too.
Mm-hmm.
But when I look back at that now, I realize that me having that mindset of
Mm-hmm.
already thinking about, well, if I don't succeed at this, then I can do this, was part of the reason why I didn't succeed. Because when I look at the actors that I know that have
Mm-hmm.
had successful careers, no other option.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. They would not be willing to do anything else. So narrowly focused on this one thing, so
Mm-hmm.
obsessed with it. And I just don't think I had that then.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I think I could have, if I
Mm-hmm.
had that in me then, and if I had the level of confidence and certainty that I have now, if I had the level of self-awareness that I have now, that I
Mm-hmm.
could have been successful. But it didn't work out that way. And I'm cool with
Right.
it because I love the way that things have worked out.
Right.
But yes, I think absolutely could have done it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think a lot of things, like you said, like is things, the life journey that we took, and it took us to different directions. So like it certainly is not a failure if you're falling forward and seeing these. So it's really unique that you can kind of see that. So coming from a actor perspective, now going to the sales, what do you think really attributed to your success? Like becoming the salesperson, we Dan Sullivan kind of talks about unique ability. Perhaps you found your unique niche. Unique is not just things that you like to do, but also you do excellent at. That has to be a combination of both. So perhaps sales is one of these things. And then I want to ask, like, how did you also pivot now kind of essentially away from a successful venture? So that second transition as well.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to sales, I think what helped me to be successful in sales was partially being an actor.
Mm-hmm.
In that, in acting, so much of your focus is on connecting with your scene partner.
Mm-hmm.
And in sales, that was the foundation of what I focused on, connecting with the other person,
Mm-hmm.
just really listening and understanding what was happening with them, and not so much focused on the outcome of getting the sale, but just focused on connecting with the other person. I think that was a strength for me in sales, in combination with, thankfully I joined a company that had a very well structured sales process and a really good training program. So I learned that sales process just like an actor would learn a script.
Right.
And I was able to combine those two things, executing the sales process while really connecting with the individual. And I think the combination of those two things made me successful. And then the third thing I'll layer on top of that, which is the one thing that I find, I've worked at this point with hundreds, if not maybe thousands of salespeople, and the relentlessness / persistence piece of it is so critical to a salesperson's success. And I was extremely persistent. And every successful salesperson I know is. So really those three things combined, I feel like is what made me successful in sales.
Yeah, absolutely. So why pivoting from there now? Or I don't know if you are pivoting from there, simply just creating an extra, activity to do. So how did that kind of takes you to the multifamily investing realm?
Well, what happened along the way, and it's been a journey. It's really been a journey. It's been a very rewarding journey so far.
Yeah.
What happened along the way is, as I grew my career there, as I mentioned, as an actor, I was obsessed with acting. When I got into sales, I was obsessed with sales. And as I grew the career and I got into leadership and I got into managing clubs, I became obsessed with running the business. And I was just all in on everything that I was doing. For about, I would say 10 years of that. And through that, there was just about 5 years ago, really, there was, I don't know if it was a moment, but there was a realization I came to at a certain point where I realized how hard I had been working and how much I had prioritized the work. And I really wasn't thinking long-term. I really wasn't thinking about ultimately the life that I wanted to be living in the future. I was just so focused on building the career in the moment. And when I shifted that perspective, that's what made me realize that, hey, I should be learning more about finances, because I was investing all along, but I was investing in the company's 401k plan. And my wife and I were putting money in a brokerage account, but I really did not know anything about what I was investing in.
Yeah.
And nor did I have really any goals with what we were investing in. So that was the moment about 5 years ago. And then I think that the other moment really was, I'm a studier, really. I'm one of those people that likes to really study and study and study before they take action.
Yeah.
So I had been studying real estate for probably 3+ years, reading the books, listening to the podcast, starting to kind of look at single family homes, but not really pulling the trigger on anything. And when COVID happened and our fitness clubs shut down, thankfully I was still working. I'm very grateful that I still had a job, but I did have more time and my income was reduced. And that's what really made me realize that relying exclusively on an income as an employee, I'm putting myself in a very fragile situation. So that's really what motivated me. I joined a mentorship program for multifamily. That's really what motivated me to take more significant action. And now at this point, it's really about, yes, it's about creating financial freedom, ultimately about creating a way to be able to support our lifestyle without relying on an income from an employer, even though I do love my company. I love my role in that company, but it's also about shifting from an employee to an entrepreneur. being able to successfully make that, I don't even want to call it a transition. It's more like being able to successfully create that new identity,
Right.
of being able to create something outside of your full-time role that you created. Because I feel like there's so many people who are probably like me, who maybe didn't really feel like that was possible for them. And I want to do that for myself, to prove it to myself, but I also want to be able to help other people do it as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then so how did you kind of mentioned it before that join the coach program, getting coached on things. But how did you lock down like real estate is the alternative I want to invest in? And then what's the process like to kind of selecting multifamily out of all different kind of assets to focus your time on?
I started with real estate because real estate, I had a natural interest in real estate. I just through my own condos and whatnot, like at least I had some experience with that.
Yeah.
Buying and selling condos and renting them out sometimes, because sometimes I was just an accidental landlord because we would end up moving and we would own a condo and it wouldn't be a great time to sell. So we'd end up renting it out. So I felt like I had a little bit of experience, and it was something that interested me, but mostly it was something I understood. Because when I started to learn more about investing, I realized, because we were investing mainly in the market, stocks, bonds, that type of thing. And I know a lot more about that now than I did then.
Yeah.
But real estate just made sense to me. Like there's this basic concepts of it, and the fact that it is a physical asset that has utility.
Yeah.
It made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And then multifamily, when I got introduced to multifamily, I went to a meetup one night in LA, and there was a gentleman there speaking about multifamily. He had a weekend event coming up. So he did sort of an overview, and then I bought a ticket to go to the weekend event. And then he did really a high level look at multifamily, and that business just made total sense to me, especially coming from the fitness club business, because I saw so many parallels in really buying a business, buying a property that is ultimately a business that produces a certain amount of revenue, that has a level of profitability, and then being able to take that, optimize the expenses, increase the income, make it more profitable. That just totally made sense to me. So that's why multifamily, it just fit my mind.
That's awesome. And then have you yourself like kind of passive invested, like then what's the journey kind of like, obviously getting enrolled in mentorships, and then you mentioned about spending years studying. What is that moment where you decided I'm going to do something? Like you mentioned about before, the catalyst was that I lost my job. This is the time now I have more time to do it. But there's also like a moment, like there's a drive usually where you like, hey, I'm going to do it now. Because it's opposite from most people. Like if you had a reduced hour, reduce the income, you're not looking at spending, because these mentorship programs cost a lot of money too. You're not looking at spending more, right? Because most people naturally, they will say, oh no, now it's not the right time because, my job's not stable. So how did you like kind of decide to do the opposite of that?
That's such a good point. And I did have that thought of I'm making less money, yet I'm going to invest in something.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was recognizing that I had been interested in this for years. And I had been listening to the podcast, consistently reading the books, and just hadn't taken any significant action. But I felt confident enough in my own level of commitment to doing it. And I recognized that, especially for someone like me, who, like I said, who I'm just not, my bias isn't to just take action. So many people, and I'm sure you've interviewed so many people that just go, right? And I have so much respect for those people that they just do it. And I'm not one of those people by nature. And I recognized that in order for me to really take a next step, I was going to need help. And by joining that mentorship program, getting the coaching, and getting around other people who are doing this, by shifting part of my peer group into hanging around investors who are consistently engaged in investing, that ultimately has been the major catalyst for change. I don't know that I fully realized at the time that I joined the mentorship program that that's what it was going to be, but that has been really the most significant aspect of it, has been getting around other people who are doing this consistently, and just the level of confidence that I gain from that, and the accountability that I get from that too.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then what is your first year like, getting into the multifamily investing business?
Well, since I'm in this mentorship program, this coaching program, it was fairly structured. The first was learning the business, getting an overview. This program had online coursework, plus what was great about them is they continued to do in-person events even during COVID. While a lot of things were shut down, they would do them safely, but they continued to do in-person events. So it was great to be able to go to some in-person education. So that was the first step, is getting more educated. Then starting to take real action. So I chose a market to focus on, which I chose Reno, Nevada to focus on. Still love that market. I haven't been as focused on it, but I do love it. And started talking to the brokers there, started visiting the market, started to underwrite deals there, started to reach out and try to find a network there. All those steps. In the process for me, and meeting so many people and starting to get exposure to what different people were doing, I learned the business, and I realized that there were different roles within the business, and that no one really does it on their own. It's really a team sport. And just learning, okay, what does everybody do? And I recognized that I wanted to be more on the capital raising side of it. That's what really was speaking to my skill set, speaking to my strengths, speaking to what I really love to do. So that's about 5-6 months ago, pivoted a little bit to narrow my focus specifically to building a brand and focusing on attracting and educating investors, so that I can partner with operators and bring value by raising capital for the deals.
Yeah, got it. So capital raise a little bit more, like, can you tell us, and then this is kind of also summarization from your sales experience. It's like, how do you get people interested in investing in an offer that you have, just in general, right? Like you mentioned that in your previous job or current job, there's a whole system on this too. And is there a parallelism between that and also raising capital for multifamily deals or any syndication deals, being a syndicator?
Yeah, I think there are parallels. And I think the big difference here, there's almost two ways to think about it as someone that's focused on attracting and educating investors. And that is that we've got the people that we know, the people within our network who may or may not have any knowledge of real estate or any interest in it. And one of the things I've realized is that the way to attract those people is just put stuff out there so they know what I'm doing. And then some of them come to me. Right. As I put stuff out there. And by the way, I mean, I used to put nothing on social media, and I'm working on being more active on social media, but I'm about 100 times more active than I was, which was 0. But that even the little bit of social media I've done has helped to increase awareness. And so some of those people have come to me because they've had a natural curiosity. Going to other people proactively and saying, hey, here's what I'm doing. I would love to just talk to you more about it so you have more understanding of what I'm doing. That's a longer journey for those people, because we always have to think about ourselves and our own journeys as it relates to real estate or anything else. It didn't happen just like that, probably.
Right.
The seed was planted somewhere. It started to grow in there. We started to do some more research, and we came to it on our own somehow. The seed was planted by someone somewhere, but we ultimately came to our own conclusions. And to me, that's the process people go through. So with the other people that don't have that natural curiosity, it's more about planting the seeds and starting to help them to go along their own mental journey of getting there to the point where they're actually ready to invest. And that's a longer process.
Right.
And then the third piece, I guess, would be, now, how do I get out to a wider audience so that I'm actually attracting investors that already have an interest in real estate, that are already out there seeking more information, and be a resource for those people.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And exactly what you do. You have a podcast, you have a platform. So you're out there, and the people that are listening to this, they already have an interest in real estate, and now you are a resource for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what are some common questions that passive investor asks? like what are you think is some basic things that passive investor needs to understand before they kind of take the leap to invest?
Well, one is if they don't have any experience in real estate, this is one of the things I've realized. It's even though I'm not that far along, it's getting yourself back to understanding the very, very, very basics of it. And I'm talking the basics of, all right, you have a property, the residents pay rent. There's expenses.
Right. Yeah.
We have a loan.
Yeah.
What's left over is something we call cash flow.
Right.
Like just really breaking down the
very
basics.
basic. Yeah.
Very basic of just starting to understand how does even the basic mechanics work, right? And most people get it, of course, because I often compare it to just a single family home, because I think oftentimes people can get their mind around a single family home more so than an apartment building. And it's the same basic concept, it's just multiplied.
Right.
And so I found that that's where I start. And then starting to now break down understanding as a passive investor, what does that really mean? Understanding the return piece of it, understanding what a preferred return is. That concept I've found can sometimes be challenging for people to just get at first. So understanding what a preferred return is, understanding where they're ultimately going to make the majority of the return on their investment upon the sale, just like breaking down the mechanics. And I think that what I've found is for people that are really, that some people have a real interest in it, right? It makes sense to them. And they're like, yeah, I really like the concept of this. And other people have sort of a natural resistance to it because I think it's just something that is different for them. And it just takes more time for them to process it. Yes.
Yeah. Personality is also very different too.
Yeah. Cause I can look at the numbers piece of it and they can say like, okay, I understand why these are favorable returns and I understand the concept, but it just takes them longer to get to a point where they would feel comfortable actually moving forward with an investment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome. And then, so Brian, I understand you're providing some educations for passive investors and then such, that's kind of what you focus on. So how does people kind of find out what your group do and then what, you offer are? Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a few ways to reach me. There's my website, which is www.maebarcapital.com. And then email is Brian, Brian, at maebarcapital.com. You can follow me on Instagram too, at Hemedinger. And on the website, we've got some blog posts that go over some basics in terms of what is real estate syndication, how would I go about evaluating an opportunity. We've also have what's called the Passive Investor Handbook. And that breaks down a lot of the terms, just the basic terms that you hear all the time: cap rate, preferred return, like all those things, breaks down all the terms and really just goes into those terms and concepts and defines them. So I find that to be really helpful. So there's a couple resources right on the website that people can use.
Got it. That's awesome. And then, so what is your kind of aspiration or long-term, long-term goal? Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Well, within 5 years, I'd really like to have a successful real estate investment company where I'm really helping, at that point, hundreds, if not thousands of working professionals to be able to invest in real estate. Because I really believe strongly in the asset class. And while I recognize that not every passive investor will want to be an entrepreneur or have that desire, I still strongly believe that investing in real estate is a step towards taking control of your investments in a different way than so many people are, in a different way than I was.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about it, is really investing more intentionally than what many people are doing today. So that piece of it for that company. At the same time, I'm a coach. As you mentioned in my bio, I'm a certified professional coach.
Right.
And that's a real passion of mine.
Yeah.
And again, part of this journey for me has been to go on the entrepreneurial journey so that I can be a better resource for my clients. So within that 5-year time frame, I'd like to be able to help people as a coach, potentially who maybe are working a full-time job and want to create a business outside of that job, whether they want to transition or whether they want to maintain both, but help them to get the clarity of what it is they want to accomplish and take those next steps consistently so that they can really create something of their own. So those are really my two goals.
That's awesome. And I think I completely forgot to ask you about your coach side of business, which we should probably really ask some questions on that. So you mentioned that you become certified a coach in 2017. What does that kind of entails? And then who are some of the clients that you're helping today?
Well, being certified as a coach, and by the way, what got me into that, something I didn't mention was that a big part of what this whole journey has been going on the personal development journey too. Which in some ways I was on as an actor. There's a lot of personal development that happens, but in 2016, I went to my first Tony Robbins event, and that really created some momentum for me in terms of consistently investing in personal development. In doing that, I decided to become certified as a coach, not to create a business out of it, but to simply be better at what I did in my role, my full-time job. And I realized how much I love that. And so I haven't put a lot of energy into that as a business, but I have worked with several people, and the people that I tend to work with usually are either business leaders or business owners, entrepreneurs. And oftentimes what we're working on, they may come to me initially as wanting to work on their business, but oftentimes what we're working on are the real fundamentals of how to prioritize their life, because they're ambitious people, like people that seek out coaching, they want to grow, they're ambitious. So how to actually prioritize, first of all, just taking care of yourself. Like what kind of habits do you need to instill to be able to show up at your highest level of energy every day? Okay, now let's focus on the steps that you need to take to ultimately grow your business. So that's what we end up working on most of the time, is first of all, getting kind of the fundamentals in their life all straightened out and getting the right habits in place, and then really taking proactive steps to grow the business.
Gotcha. Awesome, Brian. And then once again, we're going to put all Brian's information down at the show notes over here if you want to kind of reach out to him as well. And the last question I have is, we always ask our guests this question. The answer can be just simply no. Do you have children? Do you have plans for children? And do you have children in your life? And the answer can be no. And then that'll just be the end of the question.
Well, the answer is no, I don't have children. I do have nieces, nephews, and I have a cat. Does a cat count? Cat doesn't count. I get it. The cat doesn't count.
So for your nieces and children, like for the kids in your life, is there like anything that you kind of do to teach them financial literacy? Like if so, like what are the things that you think kind of really helps that?
Yeah, it's funny you asked that, because right now it's November, and I'm going to see a lot of them for Thanksgiving, which I don't see. I live in California, and most of my nieces, nephews, they're in New York, whether Buffalo or some in North Carolina. So I don't see them a lot. I haven't been a really present throughout their lives, just seeing them here and there. But I am seeing them, and it's been on my mind a lot of how do I integrate some of these conversations. But I think because of the fact that I've not been really present in their lives, for me, I think it's more about talking about things that I'm doing and then seeing what kind of curiosity they naturally have about it.
I think that's important, kind of going full cycle back to where you grow up. I mean, the aplex that you're aware of, it's there. Potentially have planted seeds in terms of the interest in real estate investing. It's all full cycle. Awesome. Great. Well, awesome, Brian. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And then we're down to at the end of our interview over here. And this wraps up another episode. And thank you so much to be on our show.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure.
Awesome.